Hey there, welcome to season 2, episode 2 of Stitches and Picks podcast. I'm Dave.
I'm Kristen.
So, in the first episode, introduction into this season, we talked about how we're going to do this kind of narrative arc to this season as we follow Kristen into launching her casting knit site. Um, Along those lines, at least for this episode and a couple in the future, we're gonna have a loose we're gonna have the conversations based around a model out of the Content Inc. book from Joe Polizzi. We are not going to go verbatim. It is inspired by his Content Inc. model. But to Kristen's point on the last episode, if there's a model out there that works, why try to reinvent the wheel, right? Like, take the good bits from it that work for you and your processes, and experiment with the rest, right? And just see what will work for your workflow, your habits, and all of that. So today we're going to talk about what's called in the book the sweet spot. And we're going to start with a little bit of some definitions, and then we'll talk about Kristen's reality specifically. So the way it's defined, again, loosely here, is the intersection of your knowledge or skill set or both around a specific audience desire. So, in both of our projects, I know the intersection of our day jobs and our skills that we've accrued through those day jobs, as well as our interests, post work. Came to the intersection of the projects we wanted to devote time to. So, why don't you tell us about how you how you came to the initial idea of casting, and what's your sweet spot, or have you found your sweet spot? Let's just start there first, actually.
Yes, I have a sweet spot that I am attacking, and I've kept the mindset that I'm still like, as I move along, I'm vetting it so that if at any point there's a major roadblock or major issue, I'm allowing myself to pivot. That's going to be way harder to do than it is to say. But when I first we've talked about this before in the first season. We talk about how I'm like a serial creator and I'm a serial non-launcher, and I do all the research and I get all the stuff done. Because of all of that, I have learned how to kind of hone in on my niche. And I was doing that, I think, even before I really read that part of the book. And in full disclosure, I have not read the entire book. But it made complete sense to me. It's like, this is the world we live in now. We have
Right.
this opportunity where we can connect with people one-to-one or one to a few based on social media in particular, where you can find those weird, like, nuanced things that you guys have in common, or you can start to hear about people's opinions more directly. And I actually have a data source, and I haven't connected it up because I have to leverage someone else's expertise because I'm not a data engineer. But I have a way to get the data to support or not my theory about my niche. So I love knitting. I was like, I want to do something with knitting. And this also kind of goes back into our conversation about brainstorming. So brainstorming led me to like my main way of revenue. I knew I wanted to write patterns in knitting, but that's not a tilt, right? That's not like a specific niche of like where I am. And I was like, well, I don't really find joy. I knit like hats, I'll knit headbands, I'll knit blankets. Sure, those things are fine, but what do I really love? Sweaters. I love this idea. I used to joke that I would always trip over my practicality when it comes to anything. And I realize that's actually a trauma response. But
That's a
some
different
of that
show.
that's a different show. I mean, I'm happy to talk about that at some point.
Of course.
But I still really love this idea of like, if I'm going to have a hobby, creating something that I'm going to use. And yes, a winter hat is really cool, but you're only using it 6 months out of the year, maybe 7 if you live in Minnesota like us, or maybe 12 if you live in Minnesota like us. Just kidding. sweaters, obviously you're not using all year, but like there's just this element of like, it's impressive, right? There's something there that just is like a little magic. It's like a sweater magic. So I was like, okay, I really want to do sweaters.
Mm-hmm.
The very first sweater that I ever knitted was back in 2018, I think. And I've been knitting for a long time before that. And I like the process was a little wonky.
Mm-hmm.
I inherited the pattern, I inherited the yarn. I like there were just little pieces that I was like, I love the end product, but there's a little bit about the process I didn't love. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm not a sweater knitter. And then when I started to like really understand more about the sweater I was wearing, there was this weird kind of tension in the neck in the front. And I was like, that did I do something wrong? No, that was how the pattern was written. There are things that you can do when knitting a pattern to like make it fit you a little bit better. And it's very
Mm.
much how the fashion industry fits clothing now. So it's really how when it fits your body in a certain way, it like your brain goes, that's more professional. So like,
Hmm.
and there's certain things that are supposed to be a style, right? Like it's that it's like that the back piece actually comes up a little bit and is a little bit rounded, so it helps with the lay of your on your over your shoulders. It has everything to do with your
Oh,
shoulders and how like
so like
if you look at
basically like more
most
square or something.
less square, more
Oh, okay.
rounded at the top. Um so yeah, if you were just do square, what happens is the front gets pulled up and you end up like with this weird pressure on your neck from the
Right.
neckline. Is one of the things that can happen. I actually have a TikTok about it because I was thought it was super interesting. Actually, it was the day that we met up because I had switched my shirt backward and I could see it was a very clear depiction of what would happen if your front of your shirt was the same height as the back of your shirt.
Mm.
All of this was like over time of like me knitting sweaters, me like understanding various techniques. And I was like, okay, so fit's really important to me. If I'm gonna like write a pattern, I want it to look amazing on someone. I was like, but everybody does that. Everybody's like, I write patterns for beginners. And I'm saying this in a sarcastic mode. I'm not, there's amazing people. I'm trying not to like, I'm not trying to belittle them, but it's just way more common for there to be people out there who are like, I make beginner patterns, so they're easy to understand. I fucking hope so. I fucking hope everybody can understand your pattern because otherwise, what's the point? Yes,
Right.
I have purchased a pattern and I'm like, I don't understand what's happening here. And it's not because I don't know how to knit, but that makes you feel like you don't know how to knit. And it's a very personal experience because there's no one else unless you're doing a knit along, which is a whole nother thing in the niche in like the knitting world. But I digress. And I was like, that's not enough. For me to like write clear patterns, that's not enough of a value prop. That's not enough of a niche for me. For me to do sweaters, not enough of a niche for me. I'm in the world. I know who else does sweaters. I know who else does
Mm-hmm.
like the type of thing that I want to do. And I was like, this isn't enough. And I was like, what is it about? I started to really think about like what is it about sweaters that I like to do? What is it? What's the is it the process of the product? I'm like, it's both.
Mm-hmm.
And it really came down to one thing. And I started thinking about it, and then I saw a post from a really prevalent knitter and she specifically talked about it. And it was like she made like a little like reel or whatever. She's like, when you order that pattern and you open it up to start it and you realize it's not seamless. And it was like, and she had this whole reaction or whatever. Because people, there is a whole chunk of people who love to knit sweaters, but don't want to knit them flat, don't want to knit them back to forth and then have to sew up all the pieces like you would sew, not like exactly you would sew in a sewing machine, but like you have to attach all the pieces together. By doing a seamless sweater, effectively, I mean, there's variations of this, but effectively, you don't do any seaming.
Right.
And I can take it a step further because, like, sometimes you have to seam on the arms because you knit the body full in one piece, like you knit in what they call the round. So you just keep going in circles. You can take it even further by picking up stitches and not even having to attach your like sew on your arms. You can actually just pick up stitches around the armhole and then just knit in a circle around the arm
Hmm.
too. So like I was like, this is amazing because when you're done with the sweater, you are done with the sweater. Like you can weave in your ends and be done with it. This is what I want. This is what I love. This is what I love about sweaters. This is part of the
Mm-hmm.
magic for me. And that was like, so my niche is seamless sweaters.
So one of the key points with the sweet spot discussions um, is that the sweet spot over time needs to be able to attract an audience and address an audience.
Yes.
Being unfamiliar with, the audience that you're targeting,
Hmm.
um, how do you feel that that definition fits with seamless sweaters? Is that too niche? Is that a
Mm-mm.
market need? Is that like a growing trend? Like where help me out better understand um, seamless sweaters
I
as an audience need.
I don't think it's a growing trend. I think it's a matter of people knowing, like understanding knitting sweaters. Everyone I've met is intimidated by like if they're like, oh, I've been knitting for a few years yet, but I just knit socks or I just knit like mittens. A sweater is so intimidating. No, no. Like if you've done mittens, if you've done socks, you can do a sweater.
Right,
It's just more of the same. Like you can do it. There might be one or two things that's slightly different,
right,
but if you can do all the things for a sock or a mitten, even for a hat, you're good. And so it's this idea of part of like the element of like bringing down the intimidation level. Like that's like a
right,
sub bullet in my head. Um, of like my patterns are easy to read, easy to interpret, understand, but you also know going into it, like when if you interact with my content, you're seeing that I started making recommendations on TikTok. So I was like started talking about I was like, if anybody wants a recommendation of a pattern, let me know. I'm happy to do it. People raised their hand and they were like, I want a recommendation. I have no patterns published, so I can't even hand them one of mine, which I actually like, I was like, this actually is really smart because like I can't give them one of mine.
that's a kind of a really good audience market research kind of thing. Find out what
Yes.
patterns people are actually looking for.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, shoot, I should have asked. Like, do you like to knit flat? Are you comfortable knitting in the round? Do you love, I asked her a bunch of questions and she responded back to me. And I was like, okay, these are my top two picks for you. And here's why. I want to tell you the why, because if you don't like the way they look, you can go out and find your own. But like, here's my reasoning behind it. So there's this thing called like
Hmm.
top down knitting, which means you start at the neck and you knit down versus bottom up, knit at the waist and then you knit up.
Right.
And so I was like, I think you should do a top down raglan because it's all one piece. So you end up doing I had very specific meaning for the recommendation. And it was really great. It was, to your point, it was really great market research to understand. And then there were people who were like, I want recommendations too. And I was like, cool. What are you looking for?
Do you
And the why.
think
And people are like, yeah,
are
go ahead.
those questions? This is a total tangent, so we don't have to spend too much time on it. But would those types of questions be standardized enough that you could do like
Yes.
a Google form kind of a thing,
Yes.
like a quiz?
Yes.
Okay,
And I've been
interesting.
thinking about that too in the background. So I'm playing around with like content ideas and market research stuff on a one-off basis more right now, but um I have I've listened to a lot of like knitting podcasts too, and there's this one um Tian Tian Connaughton. She is amazing and she interviews like various knit people, like whether they're designers or yarn store owners or whatever. And I can't remember who she was interviewing. But this one person that she's interviewing said, I have a theory that people actually have a preference of knitwear designer once they get to a certain point in their knit journey because they like the way the pattern is written. And I've hit that point where
Hmm.
I have gotten patterns and I'm like, this thing's gorgeous. I can't figure this out. I can't make this. I will not make this and I'll never buy from this person again.
Well, that makes total sense to me
Right?
because like with different artists in the music side of things, I mean, we all have the same 12 notes and you know the same patterns for scale shapes and whatever else, but there's something about the way in which the person approaches the guitar or
Yes.
the way that they actually play it that then resonates with me, which makes me want to
Yes.
play um, through them. And then like I have a bunch of friends that are like super into blues, and I love listening to the blues every once in a while.
Yeah.
I don't want to play it. I have zero interest in playing blues outside of the
Yep.
fun sort of like impromptu jam, right? Where it becomes like
Yep.
everybody knows a 12 bar, so just all right, let's do it in this key, go. Um, but yeah, no, I think the approach and the mindset and the philosophy and all that kind of stuff comes out. So that's why, for beginning guitar online, we say all the time, we're more about more people playing the guitar. So if you don't like us and the way that we approach it, the way that
Yeah.
we would, teach, here's some other great sites. Go there, by
Yes.
all means, go there. Let's just have, more people having fun playing guitar. Right.
Exactly. My goal is not to have this like audience that's only ever going to purchase from me. I don't think
Right.
that's even realistic to have. Like a knitter is going to knit sweaters and hats and scarves and all sorts of things. But if I can be a place where they know that they're going to get a very clear pattern for a sweater when you invest a ton of money on yarn,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I just censored myself there. I've been swearing earlier. Um, then that's a great thing. Like, oh, hey, what does casting knits have for sweaters? Do I like any of these?
Right. Right. Now, in terms of your other background, I mean, we talked about this a little bit in season one, but with this renewed kind of focus on it, how much of your digital marketing background do you feel plays into your sweet spot? Right. I mean, you obviously have the knowledge of the niche, and the specific techniques you want to focus on. Um, how much of the digital marketing becomes a unique differentiator for yourself compared to the other knitters that are online, right?
I feel like so that's hard because there I think they speak to audiences that might be a little bit more non-techie or non-digitally focused,
Right.
which is completely appropriate. I can think of a few who are amazing. I love to follow them for exactly who they are and what they are authentically. I think for me, my audience will definitely skew more. I mean, at least the way that I'm thinking about it, the tech stack, the tool stack that I'm going to be using for my test knitting, for the various like consumer journeys that I'm, placing for my website and then actually purchasing and things of that nature. Um, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people rely on a website that is specifically around knitting, where you can search patterns, also where I can data mine, which is amazing, and I'll definitely leverage that. But that's the only place that they leverage. There are PayHip and things of that nature where there's also some problematic stuff with that website. So that's why there are a whole other subsect of knitters who will never go on that page.
Right.
Um, if we ever want to talk about like chaos and knitting, I'm happy to give my 2 cents. I think it's really interesting. Or at least not 2 cents, but like my observations. So so by doing a Shopify website versus PayHip or just relying on this knitting website or just relying on coffees or like whatever else, like it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
There are definitely some knitters out there who have been around in the industry a lot longer who have their tech stack a little bit deeper. So that experience is a little bit more akin to probably what I will be doing, especially as it matures. But um, like I even like came like I was even like there's like fintech. Like I've even thought
Mm-hmm.
about how I could do like knit tech, like further than what this other website's doing and stuff. And it's there's a lot of space there, but it's also like that's so niche.
Mm-hmm.
So I totally derailed from your question, but I think there are people out there that do have some they've gained the experience in the knitting world with marketing and technology through knitting. I
Right.
have it from different products, different uh products and services. And so I think I'm probably in some ways and in other ways totally behind, but in some ways further ahead technology wise.
Right. Yeah, and that's, I mean, that one of the important shout outs, I think we've talked about this, previously too, is just because there are so many of these other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to be intimidated about, whether or not I should do this or forget it, I'll just be another one. Um, And I've definitely had those thoughts with BGO, because there are a ridiculous number of people on YouTube or Instagram doing guitar. Um,
I
and
feel
it,
like that feeling stems from a like a different mindset. So like my photography, I felt like that. I was super
mhm,
intimidated all the time. But I think with this, I have, since I've really only made my aspirations to be, not like this big knitting empire, because I mean that'd
right,
be cool and I would love that. In fact, I'll
right,
sign up for that, but I'm gonna only sign up for that when I get further along in the journey.
right,
So because
right,
I'm compartmentalizing it right now, I'm less intimidated because I'm not trying to be the next Madeline Tosh, which is a yarn company, by the way. That's amazing. But like,
right.
I don't even know where I was going with this, but that
Well,
was
no, I mean, you're right to call out the mindset shift on that. But I think it's just because everybody comes to it at a different point, right? And I feel like, we've talked about
yes.
how the fact that we have a deep knowledge and skill set in marketing allowed for us to just be like, well, yeah, let's try it out, because we've done this with
Yeah, the
all of these
intimidation
other
factor is
things. You
not
know what I
there
mean?
as much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so with the guitar stuff, it's interesting because it is you know what, I'm going to do it because I'm trying to attract a crowd that I would want to, talk to and just be part of the community, because this is the kind of stuff that I can talk about until people's eyes completely glaze over. Like, even people who are like,
Same.
I'm into guitar. I'm like, great. Have you done da 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 da? And they're like, whoa, hold on, no.
I do that all the time with knitting and dogs.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so if you have no
As soon as I get
idea
that look, I'm like,
of
we can talk about something else.
right, if you have no idea what your sweet spot is or what you should launch something on, think about the things that people's eyes glaze over on when you start talking about, and that's a pretty good example of where you might focus some of your energy.
Or where you even call a nerd, like where you're like a certain type of nerd.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You get nerdy about stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and because yeah, yeah.
You're having like fond flashbacks to like when people are like, you're such a nerd. You're a guitar nerd.
What? No, it's just like during the pandemic, one of the things that I got into was this channel, and I've brought it up before,
Hmm.
but it's awesome, and it's become like this little happy place for me. But it's these two guys out of England doing a show called That Pedal Show, and it's nothing but guitars, amps, and foot pedals, right? Because anybody not familiar
Niche.
with it, the effects pedals change the sound of the guitar between the guitar and the amp, right? So if you want your guitar to sound kind of watery or shimmery, or in like it's in the middle of a cave, or more distorted or something, that's with the effects units. Um, so then there's all these questions in what pedal order do I put it in? What, how do I do a boost pedal, or this or that, or this type of distortion from this particular year, or, all of these types of things. I'm eating lunch, during my work days, and I'm taking a break watching these guys sit and basically just like, oh, well, what would happen if we turn this knob like to 2 o'clock instead of, 9? And it's an absurd level of detail that, I have no one else to go to that depth with. So that channel is perfect for me because it gives me some ideas to try out. But also, they have a completely different set of tone and skills than I do on the guitar. Like, the tones that those presenters are going after, I would never in a million years want that for myself.
Hmm.
But it's the approaches and the way that they geek out about it, the relationship between the two of them geeking out about these things, that just makes it really fun. and it helped me narrow in on, oh, you know what, I don't have to do this whole like broad thing of what I think I might want for my tone. I actually, what I really want is like this little part of the spectrum. So then I'm going to focus on that little part and really find out what my what my sound is. And for any like really astute viewers of our YouTube channel, you'll see the changes in my studio with the gear as I went through that journey. I got rid of a bunch of amps, got rid of a bunch of
I mean, I
pedals.
didn't even notice, so
Yeah, that's what I said. The really astute ones. You know, yeah.
apparently I'm not
Hello,
astute at
one
all, huh?
person. You know what? That's just we'll talk about our friendship later.
True.
No.
True.
Anyway, I hope this has been interesting, at least for me. I hope it illustrates a little bit about where you can go or how you could take Kristen's approach to discovering what you want to focus in on, right? And take that larger topic of you know knitting and find that one particular thing to focus on, right? And you can eventually build up to that higher level thing, but that is definitely down the line. Do the one thing really well, find your place within it, and get after it.
I will say I want to make the plug for trial and error
Mm-hmm.
because that's I think one thing that I didn't really jump into enough was like putting out posts. Did that feel right? Social media being a good playground, doing a
Right.
bunch of different things. It was like, yeah, I liked that. I liked producing that. I liked the response I got back. Cool.
Right.
This falls in line with what I want. Or no, I didn't like that. Nope, this doesn't feel right. So there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of trial and error too that I went through that I don't think I talked about enough. So, and it's
Yeah.
putting
Well, and
yourself out there.
we'll get into that a little bit in a future episode on like the competitive research, or what are the other platforms that are
Oh
already
yeah.
out there. What are the
Yeah.
websites or influencers that are already out there, right? To try to hone where you would
Yep.
fit yourself into the market. Um, and yeah, we can get into all that as well.
Great.
Because there, as we've talked about before, there are definitely ways that work for some people that you and I would not engage with people in the same manner. Um,
Totally.
and that's totally fine. That is part of the process, and allowing yourself the time to discover that, and not feel so rushed to just go and produce content, right? Like, don't just jump into Instagram or TikTok or whatever else. Like, um, sit and have a think on how to do it the right way, and you'll be
Sit and
more
have a
successful.
think.
Yep.
Like it. It's gonna be a tagline. Sit and have a think.
Sit and have a think. Grab yourself some sweet tea on a hot day with your sweater on.
I mean, if you're a knitter, that sounds like a great plan. Because you gotta wear the sweater regardless of
Right.
the weather, just to show off what you did.
Well, being in the middle of January in Minnesota, the idea of sitting on a porch with some sweet tea is actually a really welcome thought, actually. Um,
Yes.
but we
Yes, warm
will we
weather.
will get to summer eventually. Thank
We might
you.
even have a future episode where I will be recording from maybe a different country.
All right. Stitches and Picks on world tour. I'm down for that.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for hanging out with us. Like I said, hope this
Subscribe
helps
and follow
illustrate some
us.
things. Subscribe, like, comment, all those things. Let us know how you've been
Tell a
successful. If
friend.
you're having problems, yep, forward it to a friend. All of those things help us out, so we can better help more people like us. Take care, and we will see you next week.